Hi, everybody. This is Colin Murphy, and welcome to the fifth Torcana podcast. So, before the podcast gets started, I'd like to confirm that I'm providing general information only relating to the real estate market, and it's just for educational purposes. You should always seek professional advice before taking any action, and actual returns on rental properties will always vary from person to person and deal to deal based on unique circumstances. Okay, let's get on with the show. So today I'm going to talk about the 5 real estate investment mistakes to avoid. So, first of all, almost uniquely, property as an asset class is something practically everybody can understand. It's a big house, you get money from rental income. If you're lucky, you get money from capital appreciation. It's not particularly complicated. You can make it complicated if you want, but the basics of property are very, very simple. But despite this innate simplicity, the range of locations, property types, the different types of buyers and sellers, the crazy emotions you can go through when you're buying and selling a property have led otherwise intelligent people to make all kinds of very expensive, very stressful, and just plain crazy mistakes. So in this podcast, I'm going to outline the top 5 mistakes I've seen people make over the last 10 years or so. And also, I'll describe how you might be able to avoid them. All right? So the first mistake I've seen is where people dive headfirst into choosing the property with the highest advertised net return. All right. So by net return, I mean if you have a property that earns $10,000 after all your costs and you paid $100,000 for that property, your net return for that year on that property would be 10%. That's what I mean by net return. Okay. It varies a lot. So every day I receive 10, 15 emails from sellers promising outlandishly high returns. I mean, here's a quick sample from an inbox. Up to 190% returns from $20,000. 14% net returns in Orlando. 20% net returns government backed. Fully renovated property, 18% returns. All sorts of crazy, crazy promises. So, but generally speaking, the higher the return of a property, or the advertised return of a property, because you never know until you actually do it at the end of the year, and every year is different. But what you have to remember is that rental returns are proportional to risk. That's a fundamental truth in every asset class. You can earn 8% buying Greek bonds or 2% buying USA government bonds. There's a reason for the difference. Investors want a premium for the higher risk. You could invest in a speculative stocks in some oil field, or you could purchase a fund tracking the S&P 500. So one might get you 10 times your investment, or might get you nothing at all. The second might get you 3 or 4% a year. Okay, so real estate's no exception. The highest yielding properties are never the safest ones, or the riskiest ones. Okay, so you have to bear that in mind. There's no win-win scenario where you can have high return and low risk. It just doesn't exist. And in my experience, the properties that have the highest advertised yields, where you haven't actually added any value, where you've just bought it off the shelf, they'll almost always have higher maintenance fees, higher management fees, more transient tenants, higher unemployment rates, worse access to schools, worse access to employers, poor amenities, and basically they'll be difficult to resell. All right? So something will go wrong. All right, those advertised returns, those double-digit returns that you might see in your inbox, they're based on very rosy assumptions. They often don't include all the running costs, and they will practically always change. The reality will be different. Okay, so but like everything else, there's a happy medium. In my view, a net return of 7, 8, 9% is a very good compromise between safety and risk. If you can find properties that deliver those, and you understand the risks very well, and you understand that these vary and that they're only estimates, I think you'll do okay. So try not to chase the double digit yields. There's far more stuff to look at, and it's generally always too good to be true. Okay, so that's number 1. Number 2, as in the next biggest mistake I see people make, is underestimating the importance of property inspections and repairs. All right, so I work in real estate full time, but I'm still a layman compared to a property inspector. If I'm in a property, I will not notice issues relating to wiring, plumbing, insulation, air conditioning, damp, and much more besides that a professional will see. So I need to get somebody to look at those things for me. So they cost, between $100 and $300, and they can prevent you from making a huge mistake. For example, I just put a property under contract last week. I got an inspection done, and the seller told me that the air conditioner was relatively new. Turns out it was 18 years old, so very close to the end of its useful life. If I didn't get a property inspection, I wouldn't have known that. I would have had a $3,000 renovation bill that I wasn't planning for. That was a big difference. But because I got the inspection, because I had the evidence, I was able to go back to him, negotiate a reduction, and now I can proceed with renovating the property and have roughly the same numbers as before. So that's one example. That an air conditioner could cost you 3,000. A roof which you thought would last 10 years, which actually lasts 3 years, that could cost you 7,000. Other stuff like boilers cost you up to 10,000. If you've stuff under the ground, that'll cost you a fortune. If you've walls subsiding, this stuff can cost you major money. So that's just when you're buying it. That stuff can save you a fortune. So they're the major expenses. They can be identified in advance. But also, when you buy a house, and this is another kind of mistake, a sub-mistake within this one, minor repairs will always occur when you own a rental property. Windows can break, fridges and washing machines need to be replaced, leaks will occur, heat waves will cause air conditioning machines to break, filters need to be cleaned, all these wear and tear issues that you need to be prepared to pay for when you're a landlord. So as you'd expect, some years you'll have a lot of this stuff to replace and repair. Other years you'll be lucky, you'll have hardly anything to do. So either way, I would always recommend setting aside 10% at least of your gross rental income to take care of as a fund for maintenance and vacancies. And I would actually build that up over the years so that you always have a floating fund of about 3 months worth of rental income in that account for that property. Okay, so to cover your unexpected costs. All right, so bear that in mind. All right, that's underestimating the importance of inspection reports at the beginning, and just repairs going forward. Have your slush fund, set aside money for it. Don't take all your money out of your property all the time. You need to leave some in there for repairs and for vacancies. Okay, that's mistake number 2. Third mistake is failing to appoint a competent property manager. This is one of the biggest things for me. We work very hard to find really good property managers. I work hard to vet property managers that are going to manage my properties. I don't just ring the first guy that comes up in Google. I have a list of literally 25 questions that I'm going to ask him. I'm going to look for all sorts of references. So what does a property manager do? So they liaise with your tenant, they ensure that they pay on time, they'll organize any repairs necessary on your behalf, they'll communicate with you on a regular basis, they pay you the balance of your rent, they give you monthly statements, they'll help you place new tenants whenever property is vacant. So a good professional manager who takes care of your rental properties or your portfolios very well over a number of years is literally worth their weight in gold. Like I said before, a great property manager can turn an okay rental property into a great one. And the opposite is true. You might buy the great property at a great price, but if you're putting a bad manager in there, you're not going to be making much money out of it. Okay? And also within that, dealing with vacancies is important. A bad property manager is going to have more vacancies. They're going to take longer to place tenants, or they might place the wrong kinds of tenants, so you're getting new ones every 7 or 8 or 9 months. I've seen it happening. It's so annoying, so stressful. You want to take your time screening your tenants, or your property manager wants to take their time screening the tenants, not just to place the first guy that comes along and is willing to pay the rent. That's not the way to do it. So you need to know, or your property manager certainly needs to know, what the rental market is like in that area. What's the employment rate like? What's the average family income like? Is it zoned for long-term or short-term rentals? Who's the demand from? What is it? Locals? Is it foreigners? Is it teachers, nurses, doctors? What is it? Is this an easy place to evict tenants, or does it take a long time? So, your property manager is your eyes and ears on the ground. That's how you should consider them, as a kind of a partner, your eyes and ears on the ground. You should work hard to develop a good relationship with them. Don't expect them to do all the work to build a relationship. You put in calls to them every month. They work for you. So don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to seek advice. But obviously be polite, be respectful. Don't be treating them like, an underling. I mean, be very respectful. So, if you want to minimize vacancies, you want to maximize your rental income, make sure your property manager has a good track record of keeping both tenants and landlords happy. Get references from them, okay? That's number 3. What's number 4? Number 4 is forgetting that capital appreciation takes time, it takes patience, and it takes planning. I often talk to people that are interested in buying a property now and selling it in 6 months and selling it in a year at a profit simply by sitting on it. That's gambling. That's really not how it works unless it's your full-time job. Okay, I mean, look, during the boom 2003, 4, 5, 6, it would be fair to say that way too many people invested with short time scales and they didn't give sufficient consideration to taxes, to finance, to cash flows, underlying demand. They were simply buying now before prices went up even further. Yeah, sound familiar? So how do you avoid falling into that trap? But just think of, think of wealthy people, think of successful people that you know. And if you can picture them, picture what they do, you'd probably agree that they're unlikely to invest their hard-earned income without a long term in place. If they wanted to retire in 20 years' time, you can be sure they had a 20-year plan in place, or at least multiple 5-year plans. It's very likely these people will have a firm control of their cash flow and that they'll stick to a basic set of investment rules before committing to anything. So what are those basic rules? I mean, I certainly won't pretend to know all the secrets, but I mean, I have some rough guidelines from my own personal experiences, from conversations I've had with successful people. So first one would be that short-term investing is for gamblers. Very few people can do this successfully. Buying something with a long-term view is far more likely to yield profits. Think about where you want to be in 8, 9, 10 years' time and try and invest with that in mind, okay? Also is that high quality assets will attract a premium at purchase and it'll attract a premium at resale. Okay, if you want something to generate a long-term reliable income with a minimum of headaches, be prepared to pay a little bit extra for a better location, a larger property, a bigger garage, being that bit closer to the good schools, being that bit closer to the main transport routes. I mean, don't be afraid to pay a little bit more going in, because you'll generally get it back out again and more when you sell it. Okay, also stay away from gimmicks. The best properties just don't have them. I mean, don't be listening to people that'll say this is a great property because there's a new golf course being built around the corner, or they're going to build an extra runway at the airport, or there's a big global event like the Olympics or the World Cup or the whatever coming to town. Forget all that stuff. Just stick with the simple stuff. Where do people want to live? What are the average incomes, build qualities in these locations? Where's the good proximity to the schools and the employers? Stick with the simple stuff that doesn't change, okay? So the 5th mistake I see people making is not spending enough time thinking about an exit strategy, okay? I've always tried to simplify things. I've always tried to have simple rules for property investing, which is like buying in the best location my money will get me. Avoid buying at the top of the cycle. Crunch the numbers very, very carefully. Understand what due diligence is necessary and do it again and again and again. Don't rush through your due diligence to try and buy something that's just hit the market. Go through the processes, go through the steps. So over the long term, if you can stick to these simple rules, chances are the money you invested will prove to be a strong wealth preserver, a steady income earner, and a very smart hedge against inflation. Okay, so think carefully about who you might be able to sell it to in 8 or 10 years' time, if that is your goal. Your goal might be never to sell it. Your goal might be to leave it to your kids. Okay, but generally speaking, it's safer to purchase in areas where locals rent and where locals buy. Okay, tourist markets can be very fickle, okay, and prone to bubbles. All right, so I always try and buy places with long-term time frames. Okay, I believe it's that these locations, and I believe it's the decisions we take now that will determine what our wealth is like in 5-6 years time. Not the decisions I make in 5 years time. What I decide now determines where I am in 5 years. Okay, so if you're willing to choose carefully, buying a rental property can be a really rewarding and great addition to a balanced portfolio. So let me recap. What were the 5 mistakes to avoid? First one is chasing after the best rental return instead of the best property. Second one was underestimating the importance of inspection reports and ongoing repairs. The third one, failing to appoint a good property manager and sticking with him. Fourth one is forgetting that capital appreciation takes time, patience, and planning. The fifth one is not spending enough time thinking about an exit strategy. Okay, so that more or less brings us to the end of this 5th podcast. Thank you very much for listening so far. If you're listening on iTunes, I really appreciate it if you could give us a 4 or a 5-star review. That really helps our rankings. All feedback is really welcome. If you have certain topics that you'd like me to address or discuss, just get in touch with me, send me an email, go to the website torcana.com, get in touch with me that way. Look at the blog info.torcana.com. Love to hear back from you. Thanks very much for listening. Have a great day. This recording contains general information relating to the real estate market, and it is for educational purposes only. Buyers should always seek appropriate legal, tax and financial advice from suitably qualified professionals before entering into any real estate transaction. Actual returns from rental properties will always vary from person to person and deal to deal based on unique circumstances. While we have no reason to doubt the validity of comments of any guests on our show, we do not warrant their accuracy. Opinions of the host are not necessarily shared by other employees and partners of Torcana and its subsidiaries.